Hi, good morning everyone. Everyone who is watching this either live or who is watching the replay. I'm Marissa, and this is 3 ways to heal your heart chakra. And I'm happy to be with you all, sharing some stuff. This is going to be, some of it's going to be about crystals, some of it's going to be about working with herbs, and then there's going to be a little bit about medicine practices, something closer to shamanic healing. So I just want to let you know that I'll also be telling you a little bit about a free gift I'm offering if you've signed up, and I'll put a link underneath here. And if for some reason I don't see your comments or questions, I will answer them after the live stream. So I'm just going to go ahead and get started, and I'm going to ask for a little help. Okay. Well, I'm also going to be, I have props today, and I'm going to be reading from some note cards, so you may see me looking down a little bit, but hopefully that will keep things going. Hi, how are you? Thanks for watching live. So, I'm basically going to talk about why you want to have a healthy heart chakra, about medicine traditions and healing work at the end, rather than at the beginning. So I'm going to start out with the idea that the reason why you want to have a healthy heart chakra is for a bunch of reasons. You want to be able to give and receive love in a good way, with boundaries, but also with trust. You want to be able to know yourself well, and you want to be able to feel connected to the universe. There's a lot of other really important reasons, medicine reasons, but I'm going to kind of leave that for at the end of the live stream. Because really, as we're moving towards Valentine's Day, most of us are thinking about is our relationships, our loved ones that are around us, and our families, and our own ability to love ourselves, self-love. So I'm going to start out with basically 3 crystals that are associated with healing the heart. And I'm also going to be showing you, besides the actual physical crystals, I'm going to be showing you some cards from the Crystal Ally cards, just because I think it's fun to integrate cards along with crystals and other types of work. So the first one is rose quartz. And as you can see in the Crystal Ally cards, this is called Love. And this is what the stone looks like if you haven't ever seen it before. It's basically one of the easiest crystals to find in terms of these heart healing crystals. It tends to be relatively inexpensive. And one of the genius things about rose quartz is that it can be used in partnership with other stones. One of the things that you want to do with crystal healing is you want whatever you're doing to be easy on either yourself or the person that you're working with. And so what rose quartz does is it kind of gently opens up those walls and those boundaries that we're taught to make with one another and with the world, because we've been hurt, so it's understandable. And it just gently moves into that and says it's okay to receive. And so you can either work with it by itself, or you can work with it in partnership with other stones. And with all the stones that I'm going to be talking about, one of the best ways to work with it is to have maybe a little pouch, like you can do something you hang around your neck, or you can have just a bag like this, or you can just put the stone in your pocket. And so what you want to do is you want the stone to make contact with your body somehow. And while you're doing this, what you're doing is educating your energy field to kind of attune with the crystal, and to begin that healing work of helping you to see things differently, have different energy patterns and different ways of thinking and processing information. The other thing that that rose quartz helps to do is basically it kind of well, it kind of just opens the door to other types of treatments. So it can not only be worked well with other crystals, but it also works really well with other herbs. So we're going to kind of be using these herbs and crystals in combination with one another. So I'll be talking about that a little bit later. The second crystal that I think is a really wonderful heart healing crystal, it's a little harder to find, is kunzite, which is part of this card, kunzite and hiddenite. And in the Crystal Alley cards, this is called Joy and Gratitude. But really what it's about is reciprocity. This stone, which I'll show you like the physical version of, here's mine. What this stone does is it really helps with a wound that, while rose quartz helps with that basic trust, like you get so armored that instead of keeping out negativity, you keep out good things, you keep out love, like you just sort of keep out everything. What kunzite helps with is that kind of codependent wound, or conversely, the opposite of codependency, sort of where you kind of can't get giving and receiving to be in balance in relationships. So not only does it help you to attune to what you love, have the joy of getting it, and then the gratitude, which is a natural, just normal part of a healthy heart, but it also helps keep the flow in relationships between giving and receiving good, which is a major wound that people can have. So let me see. I like the way you talk about the energetic healing properties of stones. Hold on for 1 minute. Like rose quartz. Always. Oh, I always learn a lot. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Sorry about that. Yeah, thank you so much. That's awesome. Yeah, well, basically, the thing about what you want to have happen with these stones is you want them to start tackling whatever your kind of classic block is. So I think everybody has these problems with the wall around your heart because this is how we're socialized in Western society. But that other one, the balance between giving and receiving, is another major wound that people can have. Then there's a third wound. This one is a little bit more tricky and kind of interesting. This is a stone called rhodochrosite. And you can see here there's a little child in the heart, and it's called inner child, or child within. And this is what the stone looks like. Here, let me just make it so you can see it better. This is a really interesting wound because it's one that we don't think about very much. This stone actually balances out the solar plexus, which is your belly chakra, which is kind of like an empowerment chakra, with your heart. Now, the reason why this is an interesting wound is because there are people who feel like, because of their early childhood experiences, that they have to choose between intimacy and empowerment, or intimacy and confidence, or intimacy and self-reliance. So this really helps with a wound where you either are too armored and you're very, very independent and you have trouble trusting, or you sort of give up your power in relationships. It's a little different from the giving and receiving wound, although they can all work together, because this one is connected more to power, whereas the other one is more related to boundaries. So they're slightly different versions of the same wound, but they work really well together. And to kind of just sort of top off this thing, I also sometimes combine this with stones that have to do with the first chakra, but that are very nurturing. And so this one is called cuprite. It's female power. And this is what it looks like as a stone. Cuprite is related to copper. And so what this stone does is it gives you that rest, that sort of deep connection with the earth. That sense that the earth is your original mother. And your original mother is there for you all the time and is giving you that love and nurturing that you need. Now, it also, one of its classic uses, especially the way it appears in the crystal ally cards, is that it's there for when you're so burned out you can't get in touch with your vision or your feelings. But it really helps with just, in general, feeling that sort of mothering, nurturing from the earth, that sort of groundedness. So these are stones that all work together in a really nice way, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in the next section. So now we're ready to go to herbs. So these are kind of like 3 different ways of working with 2 plant helpers to connect with heart healing. And you can see how they sort of work together, the plants and the stones. One of the biggest heart healers is the rose, seen here in this Flower Speaks card with the flower lily. I mean, it's amazing to me that more people don't know that rose is actually just as good for healing your own heart as it is for attracting love. Of course, it's wonderful for attracting love. Roses symbolize passion, and they are, a big part of Valentine's Day. But they're also major heart healers. And so I want to talk a little bit about the difference between working with rose petals and working with rose hips, which is kind of like the fruit of the rose. So basically, one of the things that you want to do is rose petals have an energy of sort of things that are petals or things that are leaves have sort of a softer energy. They kind of lift people up. They're soothing. They're a little bit more like the stone rose quartz. They're not challenging at all. And so they're there for people who have either suffered a deep shock or wound, kind of like Star at Bethlehem in Bach flower, if you're familiar with flower essences. And they also have kind of like a gentle, soothing, they just sort of raise the vibration of things. So one of the areas you can use dried rose petals is as a tea, and it's often involved in tea blends. And if I'll find a few, I'll post some of them on this business page. You can also get dried rose petals from herb places like Mountain Rose. But you can also just use your regular roses for external use. And 2 of my favorite ways to do this is to make either homemade agua de rosas, which comes from the Peruvian tradition, or you can put them in a Tibetan bowl. Now, if you're going to put them in a Tibetan bowl, what you want to do is you just want to get your Tibetan bowl and just keep putting the rose petals in them as you go through your bouquet, like you enjoy it for a day or 2, and then the flowers are starting to age. Just put them in there, the petals, and they will begin to dry. And as they dry, when you use the bowl, when you use the beater and go around the bowl like that, it gives off the most wonderful rose fragrance. So that's a really easy way to work with rose petals. Another way is to, remember I was telling you about working with a crystal in a bag? Well, besides using the crystal, you can put rose petals in the bag to feed the energy of the crystal, because this will help it to work better. The only thing you have to remember with roses is they get saturated with heavy energy really quickly. So you need to keep changing it. You can't leave the petals in there for a long time. But as long as you do that, they're excellent. They're used to feed in many love potions or love magic. Rose petals are used to kind of feed the energy of that because they have such a strong connection to passion. Another thing that you want to do when you're working, let's say you're working with kunzite and you want to put it in the bag, you can work with the spirit of the rose if you've connected with it. And so you just want to draw the rose energy into your heart chakra and then breathe in and then from your heart. And this programs the stone with the energy of the rose. And you can wear it in your bag after that, or you can use it in some other ways that I'll show you in a few minutes. And the final way of using rose petals that I love is agua de rosas. You can get this commercially already made from Peru, from shamansmarket.com, but you can also make your own by putting rose petals in a mason jar and then adding vodka. And you just basically add twice as much vodka as you have rose petals. And then just put the lid on the mason jar and then let it be in a dark place for 2 weeks. And you can just every day just turn the jar a little bit. And so what you're making is like a very weak tincture that's used externally. And so once you strain the rose petals out and put it in some kind of container, you can bless your stones with it. You can, like if you use a spray bottle like this, you can squirt your stones with it. You can spray it on your body. You can spray your room. But agua de rosas, in my experience, is a very uplifting energy. It's not like sage. It doesn't clear out the heavy energy. Once the heavy energy is cleared, you use the rose to like kind of bring yourself in contact with the higher energies. So it's very good if you're trying to connect with star energies or angels or anything like that, upper world beings, if you're in medicine traditions. It's very powerful in that way. But it's also a heart healer at the same time. So now that I've talked a little bit about the rose petals, I'm ready to kind of go on to the rose hip, which is a little different energy. I definitely will try connecting with the rose plant spirit and blowing into kunzite. Oh, wonderful. Yeah. I mean, once you work physically with the plant, even if you don't have a medicine tradition that you follow, it's very easy to connect with the spirit of that plant because you already have it in your body, even if you're only using it externally. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the rose hip. Rose hips are, when you see them on the rose plant, they're beautiful. They're like bright red, gorgeous. This is what they look like as a dried. They're not quite as pretty, but still very powerful. So why work with the rose hip? Well, the reason why you work with the rose hip is for 2 reasons. First of all, it's an immune herb. So it's great this time of year because, if you live in the northern hemisphere, it's winter and it's always good to keep your immune system up. But it has another energetic quality that's very important. Things like seeds and berries, dried berries, they're harder. They have more strength. So they're good for the kind of person who has sadness or grief, but who needs to be strengthened, like who needs some emotional courage or emotional, like almost like emotional backbone. I very much fall into that category. So I like to work with the rose hips. I've worked with the rose petals and they're great, they're wonderful. But rose hip is just a wonderful heart healer. It's almost like getting a pat on the back, like you can do it, you can do it, you can do it. It's that wonderful kind of energy. One of the best ways that I use rose hips is as a tea. And the easiest way to work with rose hips as a tea is you can buy it commercially. This right here, let me see if you can see it, is Traditional Medicinals Rose Hips. It's really easy to find at most health food stores. It's got a little bit of hibiscus in it, which is another heart healing herb, but it doesn't seem to, you still get a lot of the rose energy from it. And what I like to do is I program the stones I'm going to use, like the kunzite that I showed you before, and I program them in the way I showed you with the breath, connecting with the rose energy. So I'm just drawing that in now. Okay, so I do this with all the stones, starting with rose quartz and moving on to the other stones that I showed you. And I surround the cup of tea that I'm brewing, or the teapot if you're making a lot of tea, and I leave it on there for at least 10 minutes. And basically those crystals are touching the cup. Now I like to use either a china or glass for this. Sometimes I brew tea in a mason jar. That's just something I like to do because I feel like these natural substances make it easier for the crystal's energy to get into the liquid. So after about 10 or 15 minutes, depending on how strong you want the cup to be, you take the crystals away and you drink the tea. And it's been sort of imbued with some of the crystal energy. So I do this, I basically start out with rose quartz and maybe kunzite. I do this for a couple of days. Then I add rhodochrosite. The reason why I do it this way is because my challenge is rhodochrosite, the rhodochrosite wound, which is the sort of conflict between intimacy and empowerment. If your conflict is more reciprocity, you might work with those other two first. So you work with what you're strong in first, and with the rose quartz first, and then add what's more challenging later. If you do this for a couple of days, this is like a mini version of an herbalist diet, which is what herbalists do all over the world. They do it in the Amazon, they do it in North America, which is where you drink a fairly strong cup of tea of an herb, and you eat sort of a plain diet for a period of time, usually about a month, because you want to see how that herb like interacts with your body, and you're learning from it. This is kind of a mini one. I do this for maybe 5 or 6 days. It's very short and concentrated. And basically what it's doing is it's training and teaching my heart to open up. Now, why do all this? Because the most exciting thing is the next botanical I'm going to talk about, and that is cacao. Cacao is one of the most exciting herbal like plants that's out there. We did a series, my sister and I, Kirsten, on 4 power plants you may take for granted last year, and I really loved doing the day we did on cacao, because people just think that chocolate is bad and that it's just this horrible, like addictive candy, but they don't realize that it's not just the sugar. They're responding to cacao's medicine, and it's a heart healer. That's like its great gift. That's why we associate it with Valentine's Day. So ideally, after doing this sort of mini diet with the rose hips, I'm more ready to work with cacao. Now, ideally, you want to work with cacao in a sort of a mini ceremony. And as part of the free gift, I'm going to be sending you a couple of practices that you can do with cacao that are a little bit more ceremonial. The kind of cacao that you would most, like the best of all possible worlds, is to have something that's, fair trade, that's from the Amazon or from the Maya lands, that's done in a respectful way and that's organic. But you can't always get that. So let's say you only have access to chocolate candy or cocoa. You just want it to be dark chocolate, unsweetened if you can. You can sweeten it yourself if you want, that's fine, but you really want it to be strong. And you want it to have as much of the cacao in it as possible, because that's the medicine. And so basically, you can use this as an offering also if you're, or even chocolate candies, if you want to make offerings to the earth with roses and chocolate candy to ask for heart healing. You can do that as well. But it's really fun to take it inside your body. And so a really simple practice is you just take your cup of very strong cacao or cocoa, lightly sweetened if you want to sweeten it, and you just stir the elements, earth, water, air, fire, or however order you want, and drink it. That's the simplest way of doing it, and you can do that with any drink. But what I like to do is to open sacred space a little bit in a very simple way, and to do sort of an inner meditation so that the cacao can actually take me into my heart and teach me some things. So in this sense, it's a little bit more like doing a ritual, like a very, very, very superficial healing that you might have. And it really does work, especially if you've done, if you've prepared your heart first with these other herbs or with the stones. It's really interesting that the cacao really takes you on a kind of a journey. So let me just see if there's any, okay. So the last thing I just want to go through is just 2 little things about heart energy and sort of medicine traditions, or something closer to shamanism. Because everything we've done before this could be done, if your path is, if you're a pagan, if you're into crystals, if you're an herbalist, if you're into tarot, you can pretty much integrate all of this into your work. This is a little bit more about medicine traditions or shamanism. So one of the things that can happen to people that, is part of the heart wound is that you can lose a piece of yourself through trauma. So it's almost as if part of yourself is missing. In the shamanic traditions or in the animistic traditions, this is known as soul loss. And it can either be very subtle or it can be very, very dramatic. One way to kind of, like a sort of symptom of a very extreme kind of soul loss, besides something like being very, very depressed or very sick or in a really heavy addiction or in a coma, is recurring nightmares. Recurring really bad nightmares can often be a soul loss issue because your vital energy isn't there protecting you. But also, a milder version of soul loss, you can just have recurring dreams where you feel stuck in this one time of your life and you keep going back there over and over again. Now, while you may not need an actual soul retrieval, there's some part of you that's trying to be brought back. It's trying to be recovered or retrieved. And so basically you're trying to bring your energy back to yourself. So the more energy you have, the more integrated you have, and the more you can be there in your relationships and create the life you want. So some of these practices are sort of laying the groundwork for bringing yourself back to yourself in a more whole way. You can also, towards the end of the day, you can do any number of recapitulation practices that are in the shamanic traditions where you kind of try to bring your energy back. A really simple one is just to say your birth name 3 times and blow the energy into your palms. But if you find that to be challenging, you can also just connect with a helping spirit and blow that. Even if you enjoy working with the rose spirit, for example, you can just do that into your hands. Because it helps to basically bring your energy back so that, you get kind of knocked around out in the world. You need to kind of come back to yourself in the evening. And it also helps prepare you for dreaming. Because believe it or not, dreaming is connected to the heart chakra, as is many other shamanic or medicine practices. And so basically, the reason why you need to heal the heart is because you want to have reciprocity in all your interactions, in your loving relationships, in your interactions with the world, in your interactions with nature. That's the thing that makes the universe function in all the traditions. And you also, it's essential for psychics and healers because our ability to actually be there for another person when we do our work is connected to our own ability to have a clear and open heart. And if we don't have that, we can be thrown off. It's really easy. Also, you have to trust yourself and trust your helping spirits. You have to be able to sort of have boundaries with your psychic abilities so that they don't overwhelm you. All these things are mediated through the heart. The heart is also connected to something that the Andean people call munai. And munai is like a very powerful, loving kindness will that comes out and can basically heal and they say even move mountains. So you can see why you want all of this to be functioning in order to have the kind of healthy, integrated connection to your psychic abilities that you want to have as a healer or as a psychic. So I hope that you've gotten at least something, like one tool or maybe a couple that you can use to heal your heart, or maybe a refresher if you're already doing this stuff. I'm happy to answer questions if I missed something. And I just want to encourage you all to sign up for the free gift. Unless you're in my Patreon with Kirsten, you're already going to get it. But if you're not in our Patreon, which you're welcome to join, please feel free to sign up for our free gift that's in the pinned post on this page. I'll also be putting it in the links. So I just want to take a moment here and thank the spirits and thank you all for watching. Thank you all.